we're talking about things they currently hold by a B's being able to have slightly better margins, but there's not a whole series of tight margin seats on the other side to take off. And then there's a couple of X factors. And again, we're just having this conversation so you're on the inside of it, so you know what's happening. So when you're at a barbecue, you can say, mate, I've heard this, that and the other. Because a couple of interesting things are going to happen. I think the Greens vote goes up at this election because of their focus on renters.
Housing,
Now remember, they're at about 14% now. Total renting population in Australia is 30%. That's a rich thing to go. In the same way they did about the environment, I think they're going to do with renters. Secondly, I think there's going to be some local mayors that are going to run against Western Sydney MPs, like that idiot Chris Bowen, who are going to be able to flip it Dai Lee style, and that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch, because I reckon some of these communities, James, have had enough of these Labor boffins.
So, you know, what's really interesting happening with some of these communities in Western Sydney, in fact, communities across the country, the renters thing is fascinating, and this is why, you know, I think the Liberals have to be very careful about backing in density and things like this, because they're just creating big chunks of Labor seats, especially when the unions say, well, we'll build this if we can put 30% of our union members as essential workers
100%.
into these blocks.
Really well thought out.
But the thing is, too, you know, there's this massive push on that nobody voted for to remake Australia the way we live. And people are really annoyed about it in places like Western Sydney. And they're saying, hang on, you're telling me I've got to move from a house into an apartment? You're telling me I can't have a car? I have to, you know, take the bus? What is this all about? For them, quite rightfully, it's seen as a decline in their standard of living, you know, and it is. And this is what Labor is promising as part of getting to some utopia. And if the Liberals, I think, are clever, they're going to smartly make the big Australia problem a big issue coming up, because, you know, the thing is about, and I'll write this in the Daily Telegraph tomorrow, you know, it's like migration's a bit like drinks after work. A few makes you feel good, but, you know, too many and you're in a world of pain. Just ask Barnaby Joyce.
And the government's response is going to be, well, hang on, we've already tinkered with that. It was a lot last year, but next year's going to be lower. Well, hang on, that's like, again, please give me credit for response to the cost of living crisis, for too little, too late tax cuts, and $1,500 we took off you last year because we gave it back to you this year. But about this car thing, right, and Chris Bowen, again, governments love being able to pretend long, complicated name of something, and they're not compelling anything, but the result of it is less of the thing they want to ban. Now, I say if you are opposing this, don't call it the emissions. It's Bowen's ban on big cars, right? It's ute taxes. That's what you have to say, right? Why? I mean, do you think this is a smart policy, this idea?
Well, I mean, obviously, Chris Bowen is a smart man, and he's not going to, despite perhaps the difference of opinion.
Can we vote on that? Can we take a quick vote in the room?
But Chris Bowen is a very, very smart man. He's very intelligent. And,
well, he knew when to get out of the Labor leadership contest, 29 hours.
A lot of people said that him being the caretaker leader while Albo and Shorten fought it out was the best and most stable period in Labor Party history. That's another story. He's clearly doesn't want to sign his political suicide note, does he? So clearly he doesn't think that the impact is going to be as big or as bad as Matt Canavan is saying it's going to be. And obviously Matt, who I love dearly, of course, has a vested interest in presenting the worst case, most apocalyptic...
Until the government puts out the numbers.
This is the thing which I don't get here. You know, Chris Bowen says, oh no, it's about increasing choice, but it's actually about decreasing choice.
So it's about incentivising electric vehicles, obviously. It's about making electric vehicles more affordable.
And making petrol and diesel more expensive. So it's not about choice.
But this is
it's about restriction of choice.
But I'm saying the margins by which people are buying utes, they are so massive.
I want to get one. I'd identify as a future Ford Ranger owner.
And as a card-carrying bogan, at some point I will end up owning some sort of electric vehicle. I get it, right? I get where the future goes, but just let the market take us there. And this idea that, because America's doing it. I'll tell you, I was looking into this, which is, by the way... It's not really the case. It's some states that have legislated it. The Biden administration has just made an executive order, which means a potential Trump administration can reverse it.
Well, there's actually more to this, too. The Biden administration is now signaling through their EPA, through the New York Times and Washington Post, that they're walking back their emissions, their tailpipe reduction scheme, and saying the big push to EVs, that's going to happen after 2030, because... The thing is, I've talked to car dealers about this. I've talked to a lot of people about this. They say, you know, we really kind of thought that the rev up would keep going, but then it's like everybody kind of went who wanted the EVs and they bought them and they got them. Right, and then it's like after that, the rate of uptake starts to slow.
Yeah, I think that the key thing here is that, when governments try to intervene in the market and pick winners and losers, it very rarely works out for the best. And if you get ahead of popular sentiment, like the Cash for Clunkers scheme, for example, or measures with electric vehicles that have come in the past, like we know what Bill Shorten said in the 2019 election and how that was the death of the weekend. And of course, Australia just wasn't ready for it. I think, though, as electric vehicles do become more ubiquitous, that there is a sort of change in attitude. And I think that if the government sees that this is going to cause a massive spike in other cars, they are going to very quickly change whatever they have to do.
I don't think the sentiment changes by July 1. I think, yes, into the future for certain pockets, but for the people that are watching us in the suburbs or the regions, the amount you travel, how you travel, what you want to carry, these are the complexities.
And I think we need to be focused on hybrids as well. And I think that is the
as opposed to putting the luxury car tax on, which is what they did.
That's right, which I think is silly. And hybrids are like the gas of
the transition.
Of the electric car. We
need
hybrids as a transition. It's nowhere near as bad as just petrol only. Yeah. It's not quite as good as electric.
So don't put luxury car tax on it. You know these people. Pick up the phone.
It solves your range anxiety problem. It solves your...
Well, but you guys are both being so cynical and selfish about this. What's in it for me? When am I allowed to drive? And you guys are ignoring the great opportunities for the child cobalt and lithium miners in Africa and other places that are really getting, leg up on their education and their pocket money. So, the CV thing, it's great for the kids.
Do it for the kids in the mines.
Yeah, wow.
Do it for the landfill in 20 years' time. Good point.